What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Mind Something. If you're new here, my name is Jake, and in today's video, it is all about Flux. Flux. That's all we're going to talk about. I did the deep dive, and full disclosure, I am in no way monetized on this channel. I have no affiliation with Flux, and for that very reason, I can have a very open and honest opinion about Flux. And I want to share the information that I've gathered so far with you guys so that you're better educated. Because let's face it, Flux is in your face everywhere you turn. Every single YouTube content creator, all of these guys talking about Flux. And I'm really curious if Flux is everything that it's trying to be. So, having said that, before we get into it, do me a favor, hit the like and hit the subscribe if you haven't already. And without further ado, the first thing we're going to look at is what to mine. So currently, my particular farm is actually profitable on Caspa at 10 cents per kilowatt hour, which is kind of surprising. I think that will probably change within the next few hours once people get wind of this. But we're not here to talk about Caspa today. We're going to talk about Flux. And you have to scroll down pretty far to find Flux on what to mine here. And as you can see, it's coming in at a negative $5.77 after power. So considering that at 10 cents per kilowatt hour, you're losing more than you are gaining in coin, why would you mine it at a loss? And that's a bit of a head scratcher for me. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing the deep dive today, is to figure out, why is everyone still mining Flux at a loss? When you look at all of the other GPU mineable coins, you're going to see a very similar pattern, and that is after Ethereum switched to proof of stake, we get a giant spike in difficulty, followed by a very gradual decline over the past month or so. And you don't see that with Flux. So let's take a look at Flux's price right now. It's currently up about 2% on the day. If you take a look at the weekly chart, you can see we had a nice little pump here recently, got up to about 81 cents. If you take a look at the month, you can see a pretty steady decline over time. And of course, if you take a look at the year, we're on a downtrend. And if you take a look at the entire chart, you can see a pretty clear downtrend, just kind of in line here. However, once again, everybody is still continuing to mine Flux. So to get a really good understanding of what Flux is, you have to go back quite a ways to 2018. Now, I had to use the Wayback Machine to find this website, but this is Zcash, what Flux originally started out as. And many of you may already be aware of this, but I may point out some things you might not have been aware of. So if you scroll down here a little bit, the first thing that caught my eye was a max supply of 210 million, and then also a dev fee of 6.2%. Now that does not match what Flux is currently, and we'll cover that in just a moment. Now, to figure out as much as I possibly could about Zcash, I discovered that a young man by the name of Miles Manley was the one who created this back in 2018. At the time, he was only 16 years old. He is no longer with the project. You won't see his name on any of the Flux official websites or any of the literature that I have found. I don't think he's even listed as a co-founder anymore. And I found a video that's about 4 years old at this point. And this is a chat with Zcash founder Miles Manley and advisor Daniel Keller. So you know Daniel Keller as co-founder and CSO, or Chief Strategy Officer. He's also what I would consider the front man for Flux. And I would have to say an excellent one at that. Every project really needs a good leader. Now, I don't think Daniel would consider himself the leader of Flux. I think they very much like the title co-founder, and there is a very significant team behind this project. In fact, I think at this point they're well over 50 developers and growing. And Daniel does an excellent job at getting in front of the community. I've seen him on just about every single YouTuber's channel, bringing awareness to the project, and you can see the fruits of his labor now that Ethereum has gone proof of stake. He is an advocate for decentralization, and what Flux is going for, we'll just read it directly off of their website. The next generation of computational network. So a decentralized network, cloud services, things like AWS offers. Now, there are other things coming, and we'll get into those here in just a moment. But I want to go back to Daniel Keller here for just a moment. So, if you look at some of the great projects that have come to fruition, like Cardano having Charles Hoskinson, you've got Ethereum with Vitalik Buterin, and outside of the crypto world, you have Elon with things like Starlink and Tesla, you name it. There's so many different companies that he has at this point. But Daniel has a lot of charisma. He has excellent communication skills, and he's not scared to answer the hard questions. And that's what really instills confidence in me in this particular project. Now, to his detriment, perhaps, he may not have a filter at times. So, every once in a while, Charles Hodgkinson can get himself into trouble because he is also not afraid to say what he thinks. And sometimes you ruffle feathers, or, people don't always agree with you. And I just want to say that, having a front man also presents some challenges and some risks with it as well. But I really think that Daniel has the capability, and the team has the capability, of doing what their mission is and being one of the most successful GPU projects that there has ever been. Now, let's take a look at some of the other things that I discovered here. So, if you look at the distribution of the coin, all Flux token supply has been distributed through GPU or proof of work, Zcash. Flux unique consensus algo is ASIC and FPGA immune. You'll also notice here the block reward is divided by 50% proof of work and 50% to Flux node operators. A mining block currently carries a reward of 37.5 Flux. For each block, 37.5 Flux are also distributed to node operators in deterministic in a deterministic round-robin system, with the reward being split between 3 node tiers. As more nodes join a tier, the time between rewards grows as the queue in the round-robin system grows longer. This ensures a fair, transparent, and predictable reward distribution to Flux node operators. Both miners and node operators earn additional rewards through parallel mining, which is the distribution of Flux parallel assets. This essentially doubles the block rewards, although the distribution of the unreleased parallel assets doesn't occur until their release. So, you may already be familiar with the term parallel assets, or often abbreviated as PAs, and I really want to shed some light on this particular subject. Okay, so let's take a look at something that I found here. This talks about parallel assets in detail, and bear with me, guys, this is going to be a lot of reading, so here we go. Flux is an integral part of the Flux ecosystem and is used for everything from submitting proposals to the Flux DAO to being used as collateral for Flux node ops to be able to run nodes on the network. Flux runs on the Flux blockchain, a GPU mineable proof of work blockchain with its own custom hashing algorithm, FluxHash. This combination of its own blockchain and native coin gives Flux a lot of flexibility and opportunity as they continue to build out the Flux ecosystem. But the world is bigger than Flux. The emergence of DeFi has opened up the crypto world, and increasing cross-chain interoperability creates a wealth of opportunity for both investors and developers alike. To open the Flux ecosystem to the world of DeFi, Flux created the concept of parallel assets, a series of Flux tokens on different chains that are interchangeable with native Flux. Flux holders can move Flux between the native chain and the parallel asset chains by using Fusion, an app built into Flux Wallet, Zelcore. With just a few clicks, you can move Flux between chains direct from the wallet. To date, Flux has launched 6 of the 10 parallel assets on KDA, ETH, BSC, TRX, Sol, and AVAX chains, with the next parallel assets, Flux ERG, launching on 25th of October, which has already happened at this point. That leaves 3 more parallel assets to launch, all of which remain unknown, unconfirmed at the moment. However, the front runners are thought to include Polygon and Polkadot. The Flux team have also hinted that there may end up being more than 10 parallel assets, further enriching the interoperability story. Now, I want you to remember that particular sentence, that there may end up being more than 10 parallel assets. That's very important to know, okay? So currently, Kadena gets 10% of the parallel assets, Ethereum gets 8.5, Binance Smart Chain gets 8.5, Tron gets 6.71, Solana 6.71, Avalanche 5.44, Ergo 5.44, and then the rest are still yet to be determined. But you will notice there was a snapshot, if you remember, in October at the very last day, and that means we have 2 more parallel assets that are probably going to get announced pretty soon, if I were to guess. Now, the third one still shows to be determined, as if they have not taken a snapshot for the distribution of the 10th parallel asset. And then as far as distribution, again, there's some more reading here, so bear with me. On the 27th of March 2021, Zel was rebranded to Flux. A hard fork performed that increased maximum supply from 210 million to 440 million. There were 123 million Flux in circulation at this point. As part of this hard fork, the concept of parallel assets was introduced, with 50% of the max supply allocated to native Flux and 50% or 5% each to the 10 unlaunched parallel assets. This gave each parallel asset an initial distribution of 12 million. Since that day, all block finds on the Flux chain have been generating 75 Flux and 10 times 7.5 parallel assets. None of the parallel assets are claimable until launched, but these block find earnings were recorded in the Flux Coinbase from the time of the hard fork. Flux rewards its miners and node operators by splitting the block 50-50 and distributing them as rewards, meaning both groups are silently earning all 10 parallel assets in addition to their native Flux. Distribution of parallel assets. So, on to distribution. On launch date, the parallel assets initial distribution, 12.3 million, is distributed evenly to all holders of native Flux and Flux parallel assets who held the Flux in a qualifying wallet at the date of snapshot. With each subsequent parallel asset release, the amount of the new asset you receive per Flux held drops as there are more Flux in distribution. The first saw a 10% distribution, the second 8.5, the third 6.71, and so on. Flux Coinbase claims are also open on launch date, meaning node ops and miners can claim all of their earned block find rewards since the later of either the 27th of March 2021 or when you started running your node. Remember that each block find gives 0.1 of each parallel asset for every Flux rewarded, so you will receive 10% of your node earnings to date for each launch parallel asset. So, I know that was a lot of reading, guys, and I apologize, but this stuff is very, very important to understand when it comes to the distribution to parallel assets. But one thing that I really want to highlight here is initially Zelcore only had 210 million in supply. We now have 440 million because it was forked, and then we had the creation of parallel assets. My concern is, what is to prevent them from creating more parallel assets or distributing more Flux into the system? Because keep in mind, each one of these parallel assets, it's not a completely separate coin. It's just Flux. That's all it is. There's 440 million of them. A parallel asset is just simply Flux. It's just extra Flux that is interchangeable on these particular chains. So I hope this makes sense to you guys. We're going to move on to a couple of other things here. So here's a little bit more of a deep dive into Flux parallel assets, okay? So Flux is always striving to bring new ideas to the blockchain by creating innovative features. One such feature is the Flux parallel assets. Flux started 3 years ago as Zcash, but has undergone many changes since its initial launch. One of the most significant changes happened on March 17th of 2021 as Zcash was hard forked into Flux. When the fork to Flux was executed, 10 parallel assets were integrated into the Flux ecosystem, making it possible to establish Flux tokens on 10 blockchains outside of Flux. The Flux ecosystem is now able to interact with 10 other blockchains and access DeFi trading and features on multiple large decentralized exchanges. This not only brings versatility and great trading opportunities for Flux, but also paves the way for the future developments and more innovation. So what are parallel assets? How do they work? Well, we've already covered that. How does the Flux economic model work in relation to parallel assets? We covered that as well. What opportunities do parallel assets create for Flux holders and the Flux ecosystem? I think we kind of covered that as well, but just kind of wrap that up and put a bow on it. Essentially, by having different interoperable chains, you have a lot of different options to send and receive. And when it comes to fees, we're going to talk about that here in just a minute as well. But this opens up basically all kinds of doors for DeFi, right? And how do you earn and claim Flux parallel assets? Well, you're either going to be a node operator or you're going to be a miner. What are parallel assets and how do they work? Anyway, we're going to just kind of skim through this real quick. Just wanted you to see this little chart here. So basically, airdrops, parallel mining, all of this happens because you're either holding, you're a node operator, or you're a miner, or you're all three of the above. So going back to some issues that I could see potentially being a problem in the future, and that is kind of like our current monetary system right now, guys. So when it comes to the Fed, they can print as much money as they possibly want. And now we see the ramifications of what comes with those types of poor decision making. And currently the US is in the highest inflation it's had in over 40 years, right? And that's a direct result of just putting more money into circulation. There's more money in circulation, people spend more money, things become more expensive. That's just how things work. Okay, so I went ahead and took to Discord and started asking lots of questions. And I was fortunate enough to actually get some answered. And I'd like to say thank you to Jeff Key. I'm not sure how you would pronounce this here, but he was kind enough to answer some what I would consider maybe uncomfortable questions. So first of all, I asked, where's Miles Manley? And again, he reiterated that he thinks that he went into real estate. And I asked, any idea why he stepped away? And he said he just simply wanted out, and he sold his Zell way back. And, I hope that he made a significant amount of money from that. I'm sure at this point he's probably kicking himself for not sticking in it longer. But, to go on here, there's some things that I wanted to get out of the way and just kind of clear the air. So one concern that I have also about Flux is with proof of useful work, as they refer to it, you're essentially going to be using your GPUs to do things like, deciphering deep fakes or just all kinds of rendering projects, right? But when it comes to doing that kind of work with the GPU, you need the full PCIe slot. A 1x16 slot is not going to cut it. And so I asked that question, what is this going to mean for miners? And he said, so for proof of useful work, they'll have benchmarks. You'll be able to test your rig, and it will be measured to match it with the best kind of work. So some might just be good for regular proof of work mining. And I said most work will need to use the full slot though, correct? And he said others will be better suited for AI, etc. It just depends on the type of the work, but they're going to be scoring the rigs. And I asked him what kind of time frame, do we expect on something like proof of useful work? And he said, so Q1, Q2 will have the first test done, and it will be growing. Things will get added as we go. Can't make bold statements yet on what you need to be outstanding on it yet. That would drive people to buying things, and that's not how we roll. And I agree. We don't want you guys going out there purchasing equipment and then finding out that it's not going to work for that. But I want you to be aware of everything that's going on here, and this is extremely helpful information from Jeff Key here. So what percent of the total supply does the development team hold? I searched through the white paper, couldn't find it. He said it's on the press document, and he shared that. So according to this, 94.7% is owned by users, 2.9% for the Flux Foundation, 1.7% for exchange, and then listing liquidity 0.7% for the Flux team, which is considerably less than I thought it would be. Going back to the dev fee here, and maybe I'm misunderstanding him here, but I'm surprised to see that the dev team doesn't have a significantly larger portion of this. Okay, so anyways, going back here, let's see, where did we leave off Discord here? I think that was about it. Yeah. So, the original founder is no longer with the project. Daniel Keller stepped in. The rest of the team is doing an amazing job. And as far as the tokenomics of this project, they look extremely solid to me. But I do have concerns. I know that there may be additional parallel assets that come in the future, and I do not want the total supply of Flux in circulation to increase. And I don't think it will, but just want to point this out to you guys in case you ever see something like this coming up in the future. You are prepared in advance because you know what can happen with this type of poor monetary policy. Anyways, that's all I've got on the project for now. I'm going to continue to do more research, and if I find anything significant that I think is important to share with you guys, I will. But I think this is why people are mining this at a loss. Now, I personally don't mine things at a significant loss like that. I do kind of step into it whenever difficulty drops, perhaps. But I think it's a great project from what I can tell. And they've really picked up the slack after Ergo had its debacle with their difficulty situation. They're quick to react. Also, a side note, they did have a hard fork back in, I want to say it was like January. Basically the chain split, but even with like 60% of the nodes being out of sync and things being all messed up, they still managed to pull this thing back together without any major ramifications, which is very impressive. And that is a result of having a combination of proof of work mining as well as nodes. And I'd like to see more hybrid models like this come to fruition in the future. I think this was a very wise decision on their part. And again, I really like this project, guys. And this is coming from someone who can tell you these things unbiasedly. because this is in no way sponsored by anybody. I have no affiliation with Flux. They've never been on the channel. But speaking of, they did extend the invitation that if I'd like to have a conversation with them at some point, they'd certainly be willing to do that, which is also great news. And if that comes to fruition, I will certainly share it with you guys. So thanks for watching today's video. Hope you guys have a good one. I'm out. Oh, one last thing. For those of you who stuck around, there was one more thing that I forgot to mention, and that is actually a negative thing, and that is in regards to the Zelcore wallet fees. So the fees are high, and there's charges for just about everything. In order to create a address or a wallet for any of these other coins that you want to have on your Zelcore wallet, you have to pay a fee to create that wallet. And then also when it comes to trading or sending and receiving and all of these things, the fees are pretty significant. And here's an example of that. This person said, I've recently started getting into RTM and saw the Zelcore wallet recommended here and have been using it. I wanted to convert some BTC to RTM, so I transferred some in, only to find Zelcore won't exchange RTM in app. No problem, I'll just use Trade Ogre. The problem is that it looks like the fee is the same no matter what I try to exchange it to or sending it to Trade Ogre. 0.0010615 BTC. It's only 0.00025 total. That's a pretty steep fee. Anybody know a way around it? And then the rest of this just goes on to talk about, yeah, their fees are high. So, you know, if you can hold your Flux on a different wallet that doesn't have extremely high fees and still manage to take advantage of the parallel assets, you might consider that. I hate to say anything bad about the Zelcore wallet. I really like the user interface. The GUI is amazing, and all of the different wallets that they give you and being able to track what you're mining, what you're spending. You can separate your cost for power, your cost for extra equipment. There's some really good things about the wallet, but just be aware the fees are pretty high.